Hey everyone, on today's episode, we sit down with Dr. John Degarmo. Now, he is the director of the Foster Care Institute, which gives a whole bunch of training, over 50 hours of webinars and training for foster and adoptive parents. He also has a Facebook group that's a foster parent support group that has over 16,000 members. He also is a foster parent himself and an adoptive parent, so he knows the process. He's had over 60 kids in his home. He gives us some great nuggets of wisdom and shares his resources with us. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We want to make sure that you are getting updates every time we have a new episode out.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Britt, and this is the Stable Moments Podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the foster care system and early childhood trauma. From foster parents, trauma experts, former foster kids, and beyond, we'll take a deep dive into the complexities of the foster care crisis in an effort to better understand how to fix it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Stable Moments podcast. I have seen you all over social media and really giving great advice and help and support to foster and adoptive parents. Now, the audience for this podcast is foster and adoptive parents, but also service providers, but non-clinical service providers typically. So people that might mentor children that have had early developmental trauma, or someone that might run a program. So tell me a little bit about your background, how you got started in this work, what your education's in. You can start there.
Sure, thanks for asking. So I'm Dr. John Degarmo, the founder and director of the Foster Care Institute, and I've been a foster parent, adoptive parent myself to 60 plus children, almost 2 decades now. Never really planned on doing it. Never was something I considered, thought about, was on my radar. In fact, pretty much the opposite. I believed a lot of the myths and misconceptions that surround foster care, the children and the foster parents. I think my wife and I became foster parents. It wasn't until after the death of our first child from a condition called anencephaly, or some pronounce it anencephaly. It's a condition where the brain and skull never truly forms. And to be honest with you, I did not experience grief in a healthy fashion. My wife did, but I pushed it aside, buried it down, threw myself in my work because I thought at the time, 25 plus years ago, that men don't cry. I must be strong for my wife. So I denied my feelings, which is, really the worst thing I could have done for my wife and myself. Yeah. But it wasn't until years later, when I was able to finally accept my grief and accept the death of the child, that my wife and I, we were living in a small rural town at that time in middle Georgia, United States. And we recognized there was a need for children to have some type of stability, structure, safety through a foster care program. And, we thought, we lost our first child. How can we help other kids? We had 3 healthy children by that point. We wanted to help more. Mm-hmm. So that led to foster parenting, and that leads to what I do today.
That's awesome. So you said that through your grief, you threw yourself into your work. What was your work back then?
At that time, my wife was going to college in Australia, where she's from, and I was managing a sports and recreation center, which was not at all my passion, but it was paying the bills at the time. It wasn't until years later we moved back to the States, where after I became a foster parent, I got my doctorate in a foster care study, and now I'm the director of the Foster Care Institute. But at that time, it was just something that was, put money in the bank, so to speak.
Sure. So you chose to foster adopt. Was this more your wife's idea? Was it more your idea?
I came home to her one day, and I was teaching English at the time in a very small rural school. And I've noticed a lot of students coming through my classroom who had issues of attendance and behavior and academics. And I saw the root of the problem was in this low income area was their environment. So I said to my wife one day, I said, hey, I got a student who she's a senior, she's pregnant with triplets, and I know the environment that these children will be raised in. It's not a healthy one. What if we adopted them? And she said to me, and I wished I had listened to her, she said, as long as you change the diapers. Well, I changed diapers. We had at least one baby in the house that needed diapers for 20 years straight. And I was
Wow.
in charge of the diaper changing. In fact, at one point we had 7 in diapers. Should have got my doctorate in diaper changing. And if I had listened to her, it may have been a different story.
So you did take those 3 triplets in?
No, we didn't. We went, that began the conversation. Okay, how do we become foster parents? You went through the training and all of that.
Very cool. Okay. So tell me about your first couple placements.
Yeah, sure. My wife, she had a degree in linguistics and psychology. I've been a teacher for some time. We had 3 children of our own. We went to the classes. We thought, yeah, we're ready for this. We're prepared for this. We got a good head on our shoulders here. And I recognized within 20 minutes of my first placement that, I am not ready for this. This is a lot more than I thought it'd be. Why is this child screaming? Why is this child yelling at us? Why is this child running to the kitchen and trying to grab a knife and stab my wife and I? The child was 4 years of age, and she had a 4-month-old sister, and it was very eye-opening. At the same time, 5 months later, when the children left, I also recognized, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for this either. What's happening to my heart? My heart's breaking for these kids. They told me this would happen, but I didn't think it'd happen this much. I'm really attached. I guess they really love these kids. That made me realize the feelings of grief and loss for foster parents are very, very real. Very, very real. That was a neat experience at first placement. I learned a lot. But you know what? As foster parents, I believe we learn something new every single time as a placement of a child in our home, because every child is coming to us with the unique situations, with unique anxiety all their own. So it's a continuing learning curve, which is something I enjoy. I love to learn something every day.
Do you have like an agreement with your wife? Have you decided how many you take in at one time, or do you have a specific birth order criteria you stick to?
We used to. We used to have we had the rule that no child placed in our home older than our own biological ones. I think maybe the 4th year, maybe the 5th year, we threw that out the window. We had a phone call for a 13-year-old boy. I think at the time my oldest daughter was 10, and we had some trepidations about. We had some concerns about. We said we heard the story of the child, and I told the caseworker, well, my wife and I, we're going to try this. We're going to try it because you're desperate. They needed a home then and there. We said, we'll try it, and if it doesn't work out, if our own children are in danger in some way, we can't have this continue. He'll have to be removed. And you know what? It was a fantastic placement. It went so well. Really benefit the entire family. So we threw that rule out the window. We've had as many as 11 kids in our house at the same time. So we threw out the numbers as well. And because, in most states like Georgia, the number is 6. But they've been so desperate, and they recognize, hey, there's Dr. John. He's a foster care expert. The family's been on TV a lot. They know what they're doing. We'll shove them in their house. And we've signed waiver after waiver after waiver. We got to the point, though, where I was speaking at an event in a different state. I was training foster parents at a conference, and we had 11 kids. My wife was home by herself with 11 kids, and she got a phone call for her 12th child. And they said, my wife's a doctor too. Dr. Kelly, we're so desperate. We need someone for these kids. And my wife said, I got 11. I can't. There's no place for them to sleep. How about the couch? You don't understand. How can I get 12 kids to work at the school the next morning with one car? I can't do it. Can't do it. So that's when we recognize, what? We need to control this a little bit better.
Sure. At what point through all of this did you say, okay, I need to pursue my PhD. I need to fulfill a greater need here?
So I was teaching at the time in this rural county, and I noticed that my fellow teachers were not equipped, were not trained, did not really recognize the many challenges that children in foster care have while in school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before I was a foster parent, I didn't either. I just kind of made those assumptions about the kids. But then when I became a foster parent, I recognized, oh my goodness, these kids are slipping through the cracks. 55% are dropping out of school. There's a reason why this is. They're at least 18 months behind academically. There's a reason why that is. School is the last place they want to be. There's a reason why this is. My fellow teachers didn't recognize this. So I thought, okay, how can I bring together teachers, foster parents, caseworkers, all together to form a team, if you will, for the purpose of the child, to help the child succeed and navigate the many challenges they face in school. And that was my doctorate.
Very cool. So yeah, that's awesome, because I know I was a post-adoption case manager. So I felt like I spent a lot of my time going into schools and advocating for IEPs or 504s, and mainly just giving some trauma education for teachers to kind of stay attuned and notice things before they get to a point where the child's being super disruptive in the classroom. So I really like that, kids spend a lot of time at school. So the more we can get the whole team on board. Now, since you've done that, I don't know if that study was published or whatever, but since you've done that, have you been able to do more work in school that's like replicated outside of your rural county?
Well, the study has been printed in a book. I've actually got a book called Helping Foster Children in School. It's one of my dozen books. And I do work with schools across the country in that regard, as well as a number of things.
That's great. Okay, well, so we're going to link to a lot of your stuff, but I definitely want to link to that book, because I know that foster and adoptive parents have issues with the schools, and sometimes it just takes a third perspective or an advocate to go in, because they can be seen as a parent that just lets their kid get away with everything, or is a helicopter parent or whatever. So I'll definitely link to that as a resource. So what have been some of your biggest challenges as a foster parent over the years? Like, you weren't prepared for these challenges at all.
Well, I want to say that it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Most rewarding thing at the same time, but it's the hardest thing. There have been those times where I've questioned the system. There have been those times where I've been frustrated with a decision made by the court. There have been times I felt like I've not gotten the support and resources that my family needed. I've been those times when I've been frustrated with the birth parents for making false accusations and allegations to us, about us. But at the same time, every child's made me better in some way. Every placement has made my family so much richer. Some of the unique, I guess, the specific challenges we have faced 2 false accusations against our family, which is normal for foster parents. I've been spat on. I've been accused in court. My wife's been fouled in a car. We've had those things happen to us. There have been some situations. My TED Talk is a prime example of what drives me to care for, to help the system make it a better one. After a child in our house for almost 2 years and trying to adopt her, and then suddenly within 24 hours she was removed from my home right before Christmas, 3 days before Christmas, placed with an aunt and uncle in another state whom she'd met once in her life, and it went completely downhill from there. And she was eventually placed back in foster care in another state after years of rape. And now it's a very, very bad situation, tragic situation for her. That's been very disappointing. There's been some tough ones, tough situations from watching my own children grieve as well when they lose a sibling, a foster sibling, if you will. That's been tough. 4 failed adoptions. 4 failed adoptions has been heart-wrenching. Coming home 3 weeks after a child was removed from my home that we were hoping to adopt, and seeing my wife crumpled on the bathroom floor in tears, suffering from grief. That's been tough as well. But again, it's something I'm so glad we've done, and I would never change.
So for listeners that hear about these false allegations or possibly have endured them themselves, I know several of the dads that I used to work with just got really disheartened, not only to their decision to adopt, but they really didn't want any connection with their adoptive daughter at this point or whatever, because of all the allegations, and especially allegations of sexual trauma can just be so difficult for a dad to deal with. So what advice do you have for not taking these super personal allegations personally and staying strong through the process of investigation, which unfortunately a lot of foster and adoptive parents have to go through?
Well, you mentioned it, not taking it personal. That's hard to do sometimes, not taking it personally. I've been called every name in the book, as you can imagine, from a lot of different people. But I have to recognize this is not about me. This is about the person who is suffering. That child who is placed in my home, who's scared and frightened and confused and in fear and not sure why she's in my house, not sure why she's been removed from her family, not sure if her family even loves her anymore, not sure she'll ever see them again. And she might either withdraw or lash out and say some horrible things to my wife and I and our family. It's not about me. It's about that child who's scared, that child who's afraid. Their feelings are overwhelming them. They don't know how to process it. And it's one way they try to process it is to lash out. It's not about me. I can't take that personal. For that birth parent who might be so frustrated with their situation, who might be grieving the loss of their own child, or maybe overwhelmed with guilt because they made poor choices, or suffering from their own trauma, their own previous trauma that was never resolved in some way, or they never got the help. They may make some horrible statements about my wife and I. Can't take it personal. And that's easier said than done. You have to ground yourself and remind yourself, you know what, I need to step back. This is not about me. Let me take a breath here. It's about the person who is in pain, and maybe I can help that person, whether it's the child or the parent. Also documentation is essential. One of my more popular webinars that the foster parents do is that of documentation. Foster parents have to document everything. I mean everything, in a fashion that's not emotional, not biased, not leaning towards themselves, but just facts. Everything that might happen, everything that happens to the child. The child scrapes himself in a knee falling off a bike. Document time and place and what you did, how the child did in school, what happened in visitation, anything needs to be documented. Because if an allegation might come forth, you've got that evidence with you, the documentation. Well, this is what really happened. This is what was really said. This is what we really did in this response. So that does help.
Yeah, I have helped a few parents self-report. They call Department of Children and Families and say, before she goes to school on Monday, I was throwing a bottle in the recycling and she walked into the line of fire and she has a black eye, or something like that, where it's like, listen, you're better off reporting this, being the first one to call, because that sounds a little sketchy, but a lot more sketchy if it's a story after the school has already called to say somebody has a black eye.
Right. Or the child goes to a visitation and the child has a big bruise on the shoulder because they fell off a bike, or they fell down the stairs, or a baseball hit them. And they say, well, what happened here? Is foster parent abusing my child? The caseworker could say, well, actually, the foster parent's already reported it, and this is what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another piece on documentation is, I don't know how many parents I would ask, a child's behavior had escalated to the point where typically you would call in some type of either crisis line, or you would call in some type of field crisis response, or even the police. And the parents say, no, we stopped calling that line because it never helps, or they never get to us, or we're never triaged properly. And I know as a social worker, I was always like, you have to call, because they're assuming nothing's happening in your house and everything's fine. And even if it's just a call to say there's a problem, that's, at least you can say, I've called 280 times in the last 4 months.
Right. I have made a report. I filed a report. Absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So documentation, not only the things that happen in your house as far as bumps and bruises and scratches and interactions, but also documentation, if you need to let the county or your caseworker know that there's issues that they should be made aware of. So at least later on, you can use it as evidence.
Right.
If you need to. Okay. Well, so first of all, what was the relationship with your bio kids and foster kids at first? Like, what was the process for them as far as allowing children into the home? Your, explanation to them of what you're doing and how you're embarking on this journey. How receptive were they to it?
Well, for my kids, it's really their norm. For my biological children, it's really their normal lifestyle because we've been doing it since my oldest was, I think, maybe 6, 5, and 3. That might be right. So they haven't really known anything different. Now, we do a few things before each placement. We sit them down and talk about the child, why the child might be placed in our home, a little bit of background information about the child so they can have some type of empathy or understanding why, within reason. Um, uh, we uh, we talk about, hey, are you ready for this? Because sometimes my kids might not be in a place where they might need a break themselves. They might need some more time with mom and dad. So we don't accept every placement because we got to look at how is this going to affect the whole family. Um, my children sometimes have really formed incredible, fantastic relationships with these kids. Um, at the same time, there have been those children who my own kids have said, "Dad, Mom, these kids are driving us crazy. They're driving us crazy." So it's a mix. It's a mix. But at the end, though, I think that I really hope that my children have learned the importance of helping others, of serving others. My kids may never become foster parents, but I hope at the end of the day they lead a life of service in some fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least they know uh, you know, the struggles of the system. They have a trauma lens. They know what these children have been through, and we can use that more in our community. Well, I love that. So, what are the conversations that you have with foster kids that enter your home? And are you like, how does your decision to adopt some, or how does that play out?
Well, we've adopted 3, 4 failed adoptions. We have adopted those children who have had their parental rights terminated, and it just seemed like a natural fit. And
Mm-hmm.
every child that comes to our house, we don't have a label of foster, biological, or adoptive. They're all our family members. And we treat them that way. And it's important that we do treat them that way and give them the unconditional love they need. They don't need to seem like a label. They don't need to seem different and isolated than our own kids. So we really work hard on that. We try to include them in everything. We include some of their own traditions, if we're allowed to do that. We listen a lot. We don't judge. We try to answer their questions as honestly as we can in an age-appropriate fashion. Um, we really enjoy including them in their family. So many times we introduce them to something brand new they've never done before. Taking them to Disney World, taking them camping,
Mm-hmm.
going to the movie theaters, going swimming in our pool, to camp, a lot of things. So uh, we do a few things to include them in the family.
Yeah, I love the no labels. I had heard from another guest that was uh, very strongly believed that we had to stop calling them foster kids. She was a foster child herself and now does foster care trainings. But she said that label is just, it really hurt her growing up. And she said, she hears a lot of foster parents saying, like, this is foster son 15, this is foster son 12. And she was like, you need to say, this is Kyle, he's 7 and he loves cars. Like, it's not that difficult.
Yes, right. Absolutely right. Well, you say something like, this is Kyle. Kyle's staying with us. We are very fortunate to have Kyle being part of our family right now.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, so dropping the labels. And I love that you are able to give them experiences that they possibly haven't had and make them feel part of your family for however long that they're there. Have you had any placements that you have had to ask to have them moved?
Twice. And those were very hard decisions. But I recognize now that they're decisions we had to make for the well-being, mental health, and safety of the rest of the people in our family. One time it was when we had 11 in the house and we had to have one removed because there was so much. The child had reactive attachment disorder, and there was so much trauma and anxiety in that child that nobody else in the home felt comfortable, safe, if you will. So we had to make the decision to have the child removed, and we had to have another child removed for a similar situation. And you know what? I felt guilty about both those for a very, very long time. I felt, I wish I could have done something different. Maybe I could have done something different. Maybe it's something we could have done. We let this child down. But I also had to recognize this. I have to determine if this is a good fit for my family, and if my family is a good fit for that child, if I can provide the resources support that child needs. If not, there's a no to one of those things, there's a better home for that child. There's a better environment for that child, and I'm just allowing the child to have a better place. Now, again, I don't like doing that because I don't like multiple displacement. I want a child to recognize that, when you come to our house, when we say we love you, we mean it. We say you're part of our family, we mean it. Unfortunately, in 60 plus children, there have been those two occasions where you said, this is hurting everybody in our family, and some of us are even at risk as a result.
Mm. I totally get that. I did just want to bring it up because for our listeners, I think that's a huge worry of somebody maybe wanting to choose to foster. They feel like it's so permanent and they feel like it's such a big responsibility, and it is in so many ways.
Right.
But you are able to accept or decline a child into your home based on whatever criteria is your criteria. And if you get to a point where you feel like a child needs additional resources or a higher level of care, that is okay. So I just wanted to bring it up so that people knew that it's an option, and that it's okay to put your biological children first, or to put the rest of the mental health of your whole family first. And through those decisions, you were able to be more available and create a better environment for those in your family.
Yes, and you keyed on something that important. You've got to put your own children and family first, because at the end of the day, when the children from foster care leave your home, you still got to make sure that you have your own children, with you, and they're safe, they're physically, emotionally, mentally sound and healthy. You can't put them at risk in any fashion. So it's important. So sometimes those hard decisions have to be made. When we had 11 in the house, and the one was just one was just taking up all of our time, my wife's and I time, the other 10 children were slipping through the cracks, and that was not something we could allow.
Yeah. So have you had to make like accommodations in your home over the years, like switching bedrooms, making things, rearranging the kitchen? We hear all the time about, making food less accessible. Have you had multiple adaptations to your living environment?
Sure, we've had 3 new bedrooms. We have my man cave is no longer. It is not a bedroom. The place we had a hot tub, took the hot tub out, walled it in. It's now a bedroom. Attic space, now a bedroom.
Wow.
The cars we drive, unfortunately, they've got to be cars. They're not the '66 convertible candy apple red leather seat interior Mustang that I've always dreamed of. It is a big van that I never want to drive in public. But yeah, you got a lot of accommodations. The lifestyle of a foster parent is very different than anybody else. And you're always making some sort of sacrifice as you're bringing children to your home with anxieties. We can't, at the drop of a hat, go off to the movies. We can't go off to shopping or dinner because we have these children placed in our home. So it's a very different lifestyle. You're always making some sort of sacrifice, but that's okay.
So I know for foster parents, you have to typically have like a respite approved or a foster care licensed provider just to watch your kids, just to have a babysitter. Um, does the Department of Children and Families offer you a good list of that? Are those people easy to find? Do you have to solicit your family and friends to go get licensed so that they can watch these kids?
Well, I'm in Georgia. My family lives in Michigan. My wife's family lives in Australia. So we think Michigan's rather close to Georgia because you could actually hop in the car and be there 18 hours later. So
Right.
it's close. We don't have that type of support in our area. We in a small county of about 3,000 people in our town, not many foster parents. So respite care is scarce.
Mm.
But we have used it before, and it's so important. I often encourage foster parents to use respite care because it's a valuable resource for foster parents. And for people who can't be foster parents full time, respite care can be a wonderful way to serve as well, or might be a good introduction to foster care. If they want to be foster parents, I'd say, well, you're unsure. Maybe you want to try being a respite parent first, over the weekends to some of the kids. We've used respite care a few times, and I've been so grateful for that when we've been able to do so. It's a fantastic support for foster parents when there might be those times where you've got to hop out of town for a funeral or a wedding, or maybe you got a pre-planned vacation you planned a year ago before a child's placed in your home, and you simply can't take the child with you. Or there might be a time where your own kids say, you know what, Mom, Dad, we need you for a little bit of time. So maybe a weekend together is important as well. Circle those wagons, so to speak, to refresh yourself, to recharge those batteries. There's a number of reasons why respite care is a great program, and we've done it a few times.
Do you, in your area, do you find that people that are respite caregivers have been previous foster parents? Like, I just don't feel like it's out there and advertised that this is something that people can do. And it seems like such a, an interim option, if they're not wanting to take on the full responsibility of foster care, that respite could be something that's a great option, but I don't really hear it advertised.
No, I don't either. I think respite care is underutilized and undersuggested. In my book, The Church in Foster Care, I talk about how people of faith can serve in their own mission field, in their own community, by being respite parents. It's, as you said, it's not being encouraged enough. I think it's not understood by foster parents. I don't think agencies utilize it to the amount that they can.
Yeah, I might do some pushing on that and figure out some resources, because there's a lot of people. Stable Moments is a mentorship program, and there's people that want to give 1 hour a week to children in foster care. But those same families would probably be interested in being a respite care provider. So I'll look into the resources to give my audience, because it seems like, I mean, I have parents that just want to go Christmas shopping for their kids, and they don't have a service provider for that.
Right. Understood.
So yeah, I totally agree. That's that's interesting, because I always hear like, you can foster a kid or you can bake a lasagna for somebody that's fostering a kid, but there's a lot of in between area that seems like it needs to be filled. So tell me about some of your biggest wins. Like, this is why we do this.
When the 7-year-old boy who was so filled with anger, and really had nothing to say to my wife or I pleasant ever, when he left after 4 months, looked at my wife and said, "I love you, Mommy." When another child, a child who had never spoken before because of the abuse they had had, I think the child was maybe 2 or 3, first words were, "I love you," to my wife. The 17-year-old came to us who had been abused by so many families, actually adopted by a couple of families, and didn't trust anybody, had tremendous issues of trust and attachment. Now she is working for an agency, child welfare agency. She is, we're part of her family. Her kids we're her grandparents to those kids. A couple kids who are in college now and doing so very well. When I look back at Christmas time and I see 20 plus kids in our house, it's a victory right there.
Oh, that's awesome. I always want to let our audience know about the rewards of this work, because I hear from everyone. I mean, it's just like parenting in general. It's going to be the hardest job you've ever done, and it's going to be the most rewarding job you've ever done. And there's a reason why so many of the foster parents that I serve all have 15 passenger vans, and that's not because they did it once and stopped, right? So what brought you to founding the Foster Care Institute? Tell us a little bit about the road from foster parent and teacher to the director of the Foster Care Institute?
So when I finished my doctorate, I recognized I love the writing process. I want to keep writing. That led to a couple different books being published. That led to me training foster parents and doing some speaking engagements in my nearby area to the entire country and now globally. So which led to the Foster Care Institute. The Foster Care Institute, we provide a number of resources and support for foster parents and agencies. We have over 50 hours of online training webinars foster parents can sign up for or their agencies can use for their foster parents. We have a program where we train foster care agencies on how to create strong recruitment programs. We now have online virtual orientation for foster care agencies during this time of shelter in place. We can't meet each other, so foster care agencies now are using this online virtual program for orientation for new foster parents. Hundreds of articles, videos, podcasts from my days in radio, and a whole lot more there.
That's awesome. So the orientation for foster care parents or people that want to be foster care parents, that's something that they could do online.
And well, the agency uses that program for their orientation for new foster parents. So an agency might say, you know what, Dr. John, we can't meet in place with our new foster parents, but we want to utilize your services. So it's a 5-week course of 15 hours of training where the agencies use those. They use the quizzes, they use the book, they use the webinars. And what the agencies do is they just go ahead and do the house inspection, the background checks, and they utilize our program for their orientation training. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. So it's more of a business to business model for you, but if people were interested, they could ask their different agencies if they have an online option. And if they don't, they could say, well, there is one that they can get to help support more families. Because especially right now, I know, the world's just going virtual as it is. So, okay, so that's awesome. So if people want to get more, tapped into all of these resources that they have, I will link to it, but just let them know where to go.
Oh, thanks for asking. The Foster Care Institute, or just search my name, Dr. John Degarmo, foster care expert. The online training programs have been very, very helpful for foster parents right now when they can't get out and get their licensing hours to keep their house certified this year, or the CEUs that they need. So they sign up for the Foster Care Institute training webinars, and again, there's over 50 hours of webinars. You name it, we've got the webinar there for them on the topic that they need. Certificates are there. There's ebooks as well. Whole lot during this virtual time of ours.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that don't know, foster parents have to do a certain amount of continuing education hours to keep their license to be a foster parent. And I know that this can be a pain sometimes for foster parents who are already super busy, and both parents in the home need to get their own CEUs. And so sometimes that can be hard because, one parent signs up for a 4-hour training somewhere, and then the dad stays home, and then dad needs to get his hours. So this would be a way that you could knock out your hours at home and, while you drink some coffee before the kids are up, if that ever happens.
Yes, if that ever happens, that's right.
So, professionally, what are the common themes that you see parents or this population of kids needing help with? What's like you're hearing it over and over and over again, and you think there needs to be more training, or there couldn't be enough training on those topics?
Well, foster parents suffer from feelings of grief and loss. They don't recognize it though. When the child is removed from their home for whatever reason it might be. Many times foster parents experience those feelings of grief and loss. Their heart breaks, as it should break, because they've given all their heart to the child. And they've given all the love to the child. So when the child leaves, it feels like they're losing part of their family. It feels like they may be losing their own child. And that hurts, that hurts emotionally. And foster parents need to recognize that and get more support in that regard. Secondary traumatic stress or compassion fatigue is something also foster parents suffer from, as well as burnout and stress. Those are things that they need help with. For some, it's marriage and foster parenting. Anytime you bring a child into your home with anxieties, that's going to be a stressful time for anything, including marriages. Foster parents also need more help with working with biological family members, or maybe birth children and foster children living in the same house. Those are some of the important issues that they need. For the children, it's navigating the online world, the social media world. You and I might live in an online world, but today's kids inhabit it. And as a result, many children in foster care, or many children just in need in general, go online looking for help, looking for a friend, looking for someone to care about them or even love them. And that's where the predators are out there waiting for them, lurking, waiting for them, luring them in, snaring them in with false lies, false hopes, false promises. And that's why we see issues of, human trafficking and worse.
Yeah, and I know that just on my caseload, the amount of kids that were trying to reach out to their bio parents via social media, and that possibly being a dangerous situation for them.
Unmonitored, unsupervised communication, and many foster parents have no clue it's going on.
Yes. I can remember a specific case where a girl ran away, and they found out later through Facebook messages that she was going to meet her biological mom. So, yeah, no, those are totally relevant topics. Do you see unique issues or challenges with children who have been adopted, or that adoptive families have? Just because I feel like there's this thought that once you sign on the dotted line and once a child's adopted, that's the end of the story for them, and they got their family, and now the parent doesn't get as many resources from Department of Children and Families, and the child may not get as many resources. So do you have resources for the adoptive parent, and do you see unique challenges that they face?
Post-adoption depression syndrome, PADS, is very common. 65% of adoptive mothers suffer from some sort of post-adoption depression for a number of reasons, though most don't even recognize it, aren't aware of it, have never heard of it before, because as you said, they think, okay, we've adopted a child, happy ending ever after. No, sometimes not for the parent. The child also suffers from post-adoption depression. We've actually created a new training webinar on that topic. Yeah, and we also write about it in, I think we address it in the book, The Foster Care Survival Guide, as well.
Okay, well, I'm definitely linking to that. I had not even heard of that, and I think that just like postpartum depression, when women read about it, they go, oh my gosh, like, thank God there's a name for this, and other people feel it, and there's something I can do, and just the validation. Okay, well, I'll definitely look into that and link to that as well. So I ask everyone who comes on the podcast this. We have a foster care crisis in the United States, and we have more and more kids coming into care for various reasons. What is your opinion on how we help end the foster care crisis?
Oh my goodness, there's so many challenges the foster care system faces. To begin with, caseworkers they're overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, understaffed, underpaid, and as a result, they can't meet the demands or give the support that foster parents need as well. There needs to be a lower ratio of foster parent to caseworker. As I said, caseworkers are overwhelmed with so much going on, including their caseload. So they need to have less foster parents to caseworker ratio. So those caseworkers have more time to give the foster parents the support they need. Because when foster parents feel they're not getting the support they need, they say, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore. I quit. I can't do this. No one's helping me. I'm not getting the help I needed. I've asked for over and over again. No one's paying attention to me. But they don't recognize that case agencies are overwhelmed with a high number of kids flooding into the system, not enough foster parents to care for them. You need to do that. Also, you need to, we talk about this a lot in so many different areas, but the families those birth families need to find the support they need before a child's placed into care. And as well as when the child's returned back home and there's reunification, there needs to be some type of post-reunification support. Because if 50% of kids from foster care are reunified with their parents, 20% re-enter back into foster care, something's not working there as well. Those are a few things that we could do to help make this crisis a little bit better. In fact, I'm off to Washington, D.C. Very, very shortly to meet with legislators about reunification and reentry.
Does it exist, the reunification support post reunification?
In some places it does. It does not in many, and it's not enough, to be sure.
Yeah. Do you think that bio parents would be receptive, or would feel like it's, still someone meddling into their life?
That's the problem, isn't it? There may be some receptive to it, but I'm sure there are many who say, I don't want to be part of this anymore. I don't want, this foster care system I don't agree with it. I didn't do anything wrong, or it's a part of their life they don't want to recognize or acknowledge or remember anymore. And they just want to move on. So yeah, there is that fear, to be sure. Or many of them are still suffering from their own anxiety, their own trauma, substance abuse problems as well, housing problems, and lots of issues, to be sure.
Are there reunification plans that take place in the courts? And if you don't know the answer to this, that's fine. But that, okay, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get your children back. You've done X, Y, and Z. Now you're going to get your children back. And you're going to continue to do X, Y, and Z until a certain date.
Yeah, that happens. It happens. But we all know at the end of the day that sometimes the children are returned back home. And I'm all about reunification. If it can be a healthy, wonderful situation, absolutely. But there are those times where a child's returned back home and it's not a good environment. It's not in the best interest of the child, so to speak. Even though it may look great on paperwork, reality is this family is not ready for this child yet, or this is not going to be a safe environment. We hear too many horror stories of a child returning back home, suffering even more abuse, being abandoned, being neglected, and even dying.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you're going to Washington, and I hope something comes out of it. I also am just glad that foster care reform is something that's being talked about. I think it's a very complex system, and it's not just the system. I mean, we're dealing with so many different arms and legs of the system, and that's why I really started this podcast, was to talk to police and former foster youth and judges and experts and everyone, to see, like, rather than blame one person or multiple people, to kind of come together and see what we can do that would make this better, because really the system wasn't created to be punitive. The system was created to help and to stand in the gap. And I just don't think that the way it's implemented feels that way to a lot of people on both sides, foster parents and to biological parents often. So I'm excited that you're going. And I'm sure you'll tell us about it. I know people can join your newsletter. So, and you're pretty present on social media. I'll link to all of those places that people can find you. But I know that you keep us well updated on all your work. So that's something that we can look out for, right?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Well, before we end the interview, is there anything else, like anything real hot projects or whatever that you want to make sure that you get promoted? I just want to make sure I give you the time.
Working on a project right now that I really can't give liberty to discuss, but it would involve showcasing foster care in a very, very positive light to our media. And that's all I can really say at this point.
Well, that is awesome. We could use more awareness for sure. So I'm excited to hear the details of it when you're ready to disclose, or when you can. Well, thank you so much for being on, and I think you're going to be a great resource for any foster or adoptive parents that don't already know about you, and for the service providers listening, a resource, because they can offer this library and some of these tools to those that they serve. So thank you so much for the work you do, and thank you for helping us end the foster care crisis.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. You have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.